It's Andrew here again. Welcome. This is episode 14 and it's day 9 of our national lockdown. It's a miserable day out here in Christchurch today. It's wet and it's the morning of our March Synod, even though it's April, so we'll be having that. I'll be off to that shortly. This morning the text is continuing in Matthew chapter 9. And today we've got verses 32 through to 34. After they'd gone away, that's the two blind men who could now see, a demoniac who was mute was brought to Jesus. And when the demon had been cast out, the one who'd been mute spoke. And the crowds were amazed and said, "Never has anything like this been seen in Israel." But the Pharisees said, "By the ruler of the demons he casts out the demons." As I was reflecting on this, it occurred to me that fake news is not a modern phenomenon. Human beings have always had this capacity for hyperbole, for overblowing things. Have always had a way of seeking to diminish and to put things down that they didn't like or disagree with, or inventing alternative narratives, alternative facts, as it were. And the first thing that strikes me is the statement by the amazed crowds that said, "Never has anything like this been seen in Israel." Well, if we take the sequence of Matthew's Gospel seriously, just a few moments ago, two men who were previously blind have just walked out the door and they now can see where they're going. And before that, we saw the healing of a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years and the raising of a girl back to life who was dead. And before that, we saw the healing of a paralyzed man who was forgiven, who picked up his mat and went home. And all this, you'll get the impression, all happened maybe on the one day. So it would seem to me that what happens here in many ways just looks like small change compared to the things that have already been happening. Never has anything like this been seen in Israel. But then what happens next is that we see verse 34. The Pharisee said, "By the ruler of the demons, he casts out the demons." And I'm sitting there scratching my head thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense. As Jesus says somewhere else, that a house divided against itself cannot stand. Why would the ruler of demons do that? It makes no sense. But to people who want to hear it, it made absolute sense. To people for whom they wanted to deny what Jesus was doing and what he was able to do, of course that makes sense to them, even though logically and realistically it doesn't make sense. But it will to those who want to believe it. This is the nature of fake news. It appeals to our confirmation bias. That place within us that human beings all have, where we will see or we will hear what confirms what we already think or what we already believe or what we already are sure has to be true. And we discount things that don't fit the narrative. And so here we have a couple of cases of what to me looks like fake news. The interesting thing here, though, is that even the statement in verse 34, the Pharisees said, "By the ruler of the demons, he has cast out demons," even it being there could be fake news. In the margin of my New Revised Standard Version, it says that the most ancient texts do not include this verse. Imagine if it was never there. Imagine if it was added by later interpreters, scribes, people who wanted to actually demonize the Pharisees and make them look even worse than they actually were. The Pharisees, on the whole, were people just like us. They were decent people who wanted to do the right thing. They didn't always get it right, and they came in for a fair hammering in the Gospels. But you can imagine it here, so that somebody adds this in, because, well, I'm sure that somebody would have said it. I'm sure this is how they felt, and it may have some truth to it. But the fact that it's included itself may in fact be fake news, which I think is kind of ironic, really. And this presents us with a problem. Here we are in 2020, and the same issue that we're looking at with what is true in the first century is true today. The discerning truth can be difficult. We're bombarded consistently with facts or with alternative facts by those who want to recruit us to their point of view. And often it's less than honest. Often there's cutting and pasting that goes on to make people say things that they never actually said. And often it's the sin of omission. It's the cutting out large parts that give context to people's quotations that makes it better for us to convince you of what it is that we're saying is actually the truth. Discovering and discerning the truth can often be difficult. At the end of last year, I came across an article which you will see if you read the description of this piece referenced underneath this video. It was in Vox magazine, so I've done a bit more looking since then. And it's on a thing called Bayes Theorem. And it's about how an 18th century priest was able to use some statistical tools to help us determine what's true or not, or what's likely or not. Now, Thomas Bayes was an Anglican clergyman, and he was also a statistician. And so he came up with a very useful formula that actually helps a lot of people, particularly in the medical field, to be able to determine the statistical probabilities of whether something is useful or not. A couple of days ago I went for a medical to my GP, and he looked at my cholesterol and my blood pressure and thought that I'm in the range where a bit of blood pressure medication could be useful to prevent me from having a stroke or a heart attack. But he also showed me a statistical thing that says that we can be sure that this medication helps 1 in 63 people that we give it to. Now, the side effects weren't horrendous that go with this medication, but it raises the question. And what it's encouraged me to do is to start thinking, well, maybe I need to be looking at my diet and at my level of exercise and losing a little bit of weight and taking some measures to respond in a more life-giving way rather than popping some pills that are going to help 1 in 63 people. And the probabilities are that the one won't be me. So Bayes' theorem actually kind of speaks into that issue. And it helps you to ask the question of how probable is this? So, for example, for me, there's a couple of things that I find really quite amusing that you may be deeply offended by that I'm going to tell you about now. One is the whole idea that the downing of the Twin Towers in New York in 2001 was an inside job. It was done by the government. And the other is that the Americans never actually landed on the moon. It was all done in a movie studio. Now, there are countless thousands and maybe millions of people who believe those two conspiracy theories. That this was a controlled demolition by the government of the Twin Towers and that the Americans never landed on the moon. Now, the thing about that is this. The thing that strikes me in the end is not whether it's not possible that those things could have happened, because they could have happened. The question for me that you have to ask yourself is, how many people, how many thousands of people, have so beautifully kept their mouths shut for such a long period of time that it has never leaked out that these things never happened. It has never leaked out that the Twin Towers was an inside job. It's incomprehensible to me that there's never been any evidence that this has happened in terms of people speaking about it. People who are in the know. The same thing with the moon landing. You know, the number of people that you actually have to be buying off to keep them silent and to make sure that they keep silent to their deathbed is truly staggering. And for me, that I cannot believe. That just does not make any sense. It's kind of things, this is where Bayes Theorem actually helps you to recognise what is possible. Now, as I've said, I've posted it on at the bottom. It's an article. It's written for lay people like me. It is both laugh out loud funny and informative. I just encourage you to click on it and read it. The whole point in this text, though, and it's so easy to get distracted by this stuff, the whole point in this text, though, is that Jesus is in the life transformation business. He's in the business that helps people find their voice, their authentic voice. We read in John 8, he says, he comes to set us free. He says, if the Son shall set you free, you shall be free indeed. And yet I wonder how often we are stopped, we are stymied, we are shut down by fake news. We're shut down by the lies we listen to, the lies we tell ourselves, the lies that other people tell us. They can be both a little the internal voice or the external, the one that says, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to do this? What gives you the right to step into this place? Or the one that says, you're not good enough. Come on, you'll never be any good. You're too small. You're not smart enough. You're not holy enough. Ever heard that one? How dare you? You're the wrong person. You shouldn't even be here. You ever had that voice? I have. You shouldn't even be here. And I'm asking you to consider, what fake news are you listening to? And it might be things that you're telling yourself. It might be stuff that goes right back to childhood. Things that others have said to you that have lodged deeply in your own subconscious that just keep popping out from time to time. That keep you shut down and keep you small and stop you from finding your voice. They're robbing you and they're robbing the rest of us of hearing the authentic person that God has created you and me to be. Jesus said, I've come that you might have life and have it in all its fullness. And you'll probably be hearing me saying that repeatedly. I think it's fundamental to his mission and to his ministry. And I'm just inviting us all to consider today how often we tell lies to ourselves. How often we allow fake news to be the thing that shuts us up and shuts us down and stops the authentic sense of who God has created us to be and all that we might be and all that we might grow into from coming to the fore. God bless you.